Welcome to the Culture of You, meaningful dialogue with me and my favorite people. Welcome, everybody, to the Culture of You. I'm your host, Karen Hewitt, and I'm joined today by the one, the only Leslie Battle, a comedian, improv, and stand-up. Okay, so that's a big deal, and they're two different things. Poet, veteran, mother, wife, sister, friend, community advocate, a curator. And I say curator in terms of like events. So that may be new to you in terms of what you do, or I see you doing, you curate.
Okay.
And then I have podcaster as a new title that is
That's
joining
new.
us. Yes.
Yeah.
So
This
what did
this
I
is actually
miss?
you'd announcing. Depending on when yours comes out, this might be how people find out that I'm doing a podcast.
That's the point. That's the point that we're trying to do. So yes, want to
Oh my.
amplify your voice. But that's the titles I have. What did I miss? Anything you want to put in there that I didn't put in there?
Dreamer.
Ooh, I like that. I
Because
feel like you have
I've
to be
struggled
one to
with
be a
that.
poet.
Huh?
I feel like you have to be a dreamer to be a poet, but carry on.
Well, I feel like it's one of those not all rectangles or squares kind of things. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, not all dreamers are poets. And I've been really struggling to embrace these titles. Like, you know me well enough, and a lot of people know me well enough that Leslie doesn't run around bragging about herself.
Mhm.
And so even though she's done a thing, she doesn't like talk about, how she did the things. Like, I'm out here doing all these things. Oh, I guess I can embrace this one too. I'm also dancing. I'm doing belly dance.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's
so my
exciting.
first public performance with my troupe is gonna be next Saturday, March 9th at the Gift of Light Expo, and I'm gonna be dancing with a sword on my head. I think that's pretty badass, so
Listen, you never cease to amaze me. You're also a storyteller, so I want to throw
very
that in
much
the
a
bin.
storyteller.
But you don't just like come out. You're like not like, oh, I'm just getting dance classes. You're like, I'm performing on March 9th. It will probably be past the date when this comes out, but like you have a whole troupe. Like that's exciting.
Well, I joined a troupe, so it's not
Yes,
my troupe per se, but it's a troupe
fair.
that I belong to. But absolutely. But that's a thing too, in as much as I kind of um back up. I dare say that maybe when I had my security clearance, this is the thing that taught me to be kind of compartmented because
Mhm.
there's stuff that everybody gets to know, there's stuff that not everybody gets to know, right?
That's
And
real.
so in as much like I've been holding on to the belly dance, except of course for the people that I go to class with, because they see me there. But I've been holding off on the belly dance until the first public performance because I feel like that's like a mark of, okay, no, I'm actually serious about this. Like I've invested in this to the point that I'm willing to, do this in public. But I'm not gonna lie, mother of four is over here like, so I'm gonna wear that skimpy little bejeweled freaking.
Yes, it is
I
time. Pull
absolutely
it
am.
out.
Absolutely am. It's
Yes.
lavender, and, one of the principal dancers, she's also, my acupuncturist, and she's just like, "I just love a fringe monster because a fringe monster" so it's got a lot of fringe on the bra, so it moves a lot, right? And she's
Mhm.
like, "I just love a fringe monster because even if your movements are subtle, they kinda come out with the beating," and I'm just like, "But also you can't see them stretch marks." So
Oh, I'm all about the stretch marks. In terms of body positivity, I'm all like, take care of you, you know yourself best, but like show us the skin. Let's see it.
It's funny because and you've seen me, I will absolutely put on a cat suit, I will put
You
on a mini
will.
skirt, I will put on some short shorts, but there's been something about showing the belly that I've just been real reluctant about, and I absolutely, see other people, like, hanging out with the ladies from Big Girl Burlesque, right? Like, I'm just
Mhm.
like, "No, absolutely, I get it now." Like, there was a time when I was a little resistant about body positivity, and then when I realized it was just kinda like but exactly, those chicks you see rocking the runway are not the average size
No.
person, and why are we
Mhm.
not celebrating average sized people because everybody has a story, like there's more to us than just our bodies, but yet people want to put people in a pigeonhole or whatever. But yeah, my tum tum, and I mean, two of my
My
babies weigh
tum-tum.
9 pounds. So you
Whew.
would think that I would be like, I get it. This is what bodies do,
Yeah.
But that's something that I've been so conscious about, especially now that I put on all
Mm.
this happy weight. Like I'm happy to be happy, but oh my gosh, like I've gained like 40 pounds since Mike and I have been together. And that's
Mhm.
a bit. It's
You
a substantial
know,
percentage of what I was before.
it is because I mean, we talk around that, and I love that we just jump right into hot body positivity, like, right off the bat, but, I mean, things have changed, and I think they definitely change over the years, and, I was at my highest weight recently, and, um yes, of course I can do things, but I'm like, I'm waiting for the blood work. Like, tell me how I'm doing health wise, right? And what I need to do, and then I'll figure that out. But even around all this, like, it's really unreasonable. But our bodies are fucking miracles. Like, it's just really unreasonable the expectations that we put on them. And we know the health and beauty industry is a booming industry in all the ways. But I just for those that are empowered enough to embrace it and for those of the that want to do the work and do different things, I'm all about that too. I just think, we have these socialized images and thoughts about what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to look like, and they're really unrealistic in this America right now.
Yeah. And I think though too that in as much as people have been thinking and speaking about health a lot more, I'd say in the past 15, 20 years, but we're still not saying this part out loud is there are some skinny people who are unhealthy and there are some larger people who are healthy.
Right.
Like, we get and again, this is one of those things like for me as a Gen Xer, like I gotta unlearn that the weight number is not the end all do all. One thing that I
Hmm.
learned, I don't know, this was probably about a year ago, was remember how everybody was talking about, your BMI, your body fat, and like it needs to be
Hmm.
a certain percentage. Well, Google is your friend. And I was like trying to figure out where I was supposed to be because I was thinking that I needed to be back down to like 155. Now I'm 5'8", right? And I was thinking I need to be back 155 because that's where I was before I moved in with Mike. And what they don't tell you is that your BMI on average is going to trend upward as we age, just because we have these hormonal changes and all this other stuff going on in our bodies. And so here I am as a 50-year-old woman thinking I need to get back to my 35-year-old weight. That's really
It's
not,
never gonna
like you said,
happen.
realistic. And
Hmm.
so it was really kind of liberating, but maybe too much because I knew it went the other direction. But and again, it has to do with how you feel
Hmm.
because the larger people who are healthy and feel healthy, they feel healthy and it's how you feel.
Yep.
But if, you're getting, winded climbing a flight of stairs or, you're having aches and pains that you didn't have before because like your center of gravity is shifted or whatever, then that's, a little bit different thing. But again, it's not all centered around the number. It's about what's going on with your body.
Hmm.
Because if there's things going on with your body that are indicating a decline in your health, then absolutely that's something to be, at minimum mindful of, but
Hmm.
you know, optimally prepared to maybe do something about that. Because at the end of the day, you could be relieving yourself of some pain.
Right.
So, but yeah, strictly from the number
Mm.
standpoint, yeah, we need to get away from that.
All to say, put that belly out there and dance
Shake
away. I can't
it,
wait.
shake it, shake it, shake it,
Have fun. I know you're gonna send us
shimmy.
pictures and put it all up there, but I
Oh yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
wait to hear more about that. So I think people probably have a good idea so far of your personality and how you are, but can you define for us, for people that maybe don't know you, what does your vibe or culture like that you create or the culture in your house, the culture where you are, wherever you go, when you're, on a comedy stage, whatever, what is the vibe that you're trying to create personally and professionally?
I'm gonna boil it down to one word, and it's
Ooh, that has not been done yet in 2 seasons.
acceptance.
Mm.
Okay, I said one word, but now I gotta explain the word, right?
Well, now you gotta explain it because we gotta know what it means to you.
So, especially in the past 10, 15 years of my life since I got divorced the second time,
Mhm.
I really got invested in what honesty means.
Mm.
And especially when we're talking about body positivity, when we're talking about LGBTQ, spaces, when we're talking about um, non-mainstream people, right? Even as I was growing up, and I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that um, division and bullying and that kind of stuff doesn't exist. It still absolutely exists. I'm not trying to say that doesn't exist, but there were a lot of things that I learned about certain groups of people that are completely inaccurate. And so one of the things that I try to do just in dealing with people from individuals to an audience now, I mean, yeah, let's be real. There's some folks in some audiences that I'm not going to accept them trying to, make me not be a human. Like we
Right.
have a line, right? But when it comes to people just living their lives authentically and being
Mhm.
themselves, um, I'm a big fan of that. I really, in a way, I'm so disappointed in humanity that for so many people that's such a challenge
Right.
to just be able to be themselves without being harassed, without being, accosted, without being, demeaned or losing, the same civil rights that other citizens have over something that has nothing to do with, how they function, be it, in an employment setting or whatnot. It's the older I get, the weirder it is to me how hung up conservatives are on gender and gender presentation, and it's just kind of like, but see, if y'all hadn't have created this whole, women being inferior thing, then you wouldn't have.
It's just an
Look,
extension of the
it
mess
is.
that they
So
created with
yeah,
the
I
binary, yeah.
I just try to I strive, but I've also needed to learn a lot. There was, again, stuff that I've been told before that was completely inaccurate. And so I've tried to learn and embrace people, and I'm excited about the people that I get to spend time with. You and Aaron and
Mhm.
folks like, Sue Flat, Wonder Doug, like AS Green. Like
Mhm.
there's so many people that I've had the opportunity to share space with and be honest with and learn about how similar our lives are.
Mhm.
And it just boggles my mind that there are people that are so invested in trying to make the thing that's different be the thing that means we can't get along. Like,
Right.
why? Why? Who has energy for that? We know who has energy for that, but it's
Yeah. Power, greed,
Did I say it without
the huge. Um, so in coming on here, and I'm gonna ask you the hard things, and if there's anything you ever don't want to talk about, you just say stop, and then we'll work on it. But so you are a comedian, so I do want to talk about that culture a little bit, as
oh,
I'm also in
oh,
that as an improv person, and maybe this can take a generational lens of a look. What are the biggest challenges you have right now connecting with different comedic audiences? What are you seeing? Because I can't imagine doing stand up in America's 2024. I cannot. You are so brave. I know we joke about that sometimes, be like, "Oh, you're so brave," but like, no, you really are brave. And so, what are your biggest challenges right now with your comedic audiences in writing, whatever that looks like in your process? How are you experiencing right now?
well, I can say, and I don't know if this is just like specific to 2024, but there's definitely value in finding out who your audience is,
Mhm.
because I know there's a bunch of people, especially you get about 10, 15 miles out of the Columbus city's limits,
Mhm.
that, aren't prepared to hear some real stuff. Now, I have kind of a range of what I would call my standby jokes.
Mhm.
And some of them are for the super progressive.
Right.
Some of them are for the folks who, have one black friend or maybe none.
Mhm.
And the thing is, though, what I have found is I've been, in some of these rural rooms where I expected everybody to be super uptight and they were exactly the opposite.
Mhm.
So you absolutely may need to adjust a little bit for your audience, but you should never actually lose yourself.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of getting away from the question, but I was just recounting the story to another friend that I had lunch with today. How, oh, how do I do this without? So I was involved in a fairly prestigious competition. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
And this was in 2019. And so I was like super excited to be a part of this thing, even though competitions are so subjective. Like
Mhm.
there's the idea of there being actual science behind it is like we can dream, but and so the thing was, I had already had my share of run-ins with, predators, for want of a
Mhm.
better word. And unfortunately, there's this idea, especially for women in any kind of entertainment, that you dealing with a predator is just par for the course. It's
Mm.
paying your dues. It's part of what you got to deal with, right?
Ooh, ooh,
Yeah,
ooh.
we do. We need to stick
Alright,
a pin
we about to get into it. Go on. Let's do it.
So, long story short, this is when my hair was still locked, right? So
Okay.
I had micro locks that were about chest length, maybe under boob, right?
Mhm.
And this person who was one of the co-creators of the competition,
Mhm.
um, there's a lot of people, especially people who are not mainstream, who hold on to old ideas and they can get away with it because they're in positions of power, right?
Mhm.
And so this person thought it would be funny to grab a handful of my hair, and in his other hand, he had a pair of scissors and pretend to cut my hair.
Oh, no. Hell no.
So, on one hand, and again, I was in a space like in my personal life, because sometimes you hit rock bottom, right?
Mhm.
So, on the one hand, I absolutely wanted to do violence unto this person because they touched me first. But on the other hand, it was just like, but no matter how I react, that's the person who has power. And I'm gonna be made to be the crazy one because nobody's gonna take my side because that's the person who has power. And we see that play out over and over
Yeah,
and over again. I
absolutely.
mean, so often we see that play out.
It's so
So,
interesting because it's like perceived power or actual power, but carry on.
well, also, right? But in the
Mhm.
moment, my perception was there's no way that I can react in kind to this and not have repercussions,
Mhm.
right?
For you. Right.
Right. So I ended up just kind of like, snatching my hair off and being like, you really should never touch me again. And he realized that I was being serious and it was just like, okay, but it shouldn't even got to that. Like, why are you touching me at all?
Without
In
my
front of all these
consent.
people too,
Yeah.
like what are you doing? But I decided to step away from comedy after that. But of course, then COVID happened, and so it looked like
We
everybody
all
quit for
did. Right,
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 right.
right.
But that was the thing. It was just like, how much of my soul do I have to sell
Mm.
to get to the places where I want to be in an industry that doesn't have HR, in
Mhm.
an industry that has a number of predators in positions of power, which I mean, I'm not saying that that's unique to comedy, but that's the
Right,
thing. It's just kind of like, how much am I willing to invest and or lose? What is my gamble
right.
for this potential unknown, unseen, undetermined reward?
Mm.
And even when I decided to come back, which the timing of that was something else, but there is very much an internal struggle with me on a couple of points. One, I remember me in my prime, and I remember when I could do half an hour, 40 minutes without a problem. And I'm plateauing around 2025 right now, and that makes me a little insecure because I would rather do more like corporate and stuff like daytime because you
Oh,
girls
yeah.
get like I need to be
Yeah. Need a
in
little
like this
soft
month
landing
if we can manage it, right? But
phase
yeah,
out, right.
so, in as much as me having to deal with audiences and figuring out how to navigate, what I'm doing with this art right now, but one, now poetry's caught my eye, and because of the variety shows and connections that I made through comedy, I've been able to, interact more with poets. And y'all keep telling me that I'm also a poet. And I'm just like, well, I mean, I wrote some poems. Then bet you a poet. Like, why is that so hard to
Yes, I'm so glad you
understand?
walked through that,
Poets
so I
write
didn't have to
poems.
say
You wrote a
that. Thank
poem.
you.
It's math. What are you doing?
Mhm, mhm.
But I do have, while I still have the affinity that I have had for comedy, I have other opportunities as well. And like so many art forms, if you're really going to like try to make it your livelihood, then it's got to partially consume you, right? Like
Mm,
you've got to give it a good bit of time. You've got to give it a lot of space. You've got to make those connections. You've got to do that traveling. Like there's no one
yeah,
city that's going to give you 52 weeks worth of work, right?
right.
So if you can't, be in one city all year long, what you got to do, you got to travel. Like that's, the way that it goes. And so I'm really kind of in a place right now, like if I'm not giving this the kind of energy I need to accomplish what I want to accomplish, then what is my plan?
Mhm,
Because you can absolutely be a hobbyist. There's nothing wrong with being a hobbyist. I love going places and delivering material and people liking it. Like I know
mhm,
who the folks are that can handle my what I consider more salacious jokes, right?
mhm.
But you don't always get to be in that room. So, am I still chasing the other rooms? Or am I just gonna be like, you know what, but I can handle just doing this one show, you know, every 3, 4 months and be cool with it. But in the meantime, I'm also belly dancing. I'm also doing
Mhm,
poetry shows. I'm
mhm.
also, doing my podcast. And so I don't even know if I answered your question.
You did. I think this brings the question of like, the cost. There's a cost to everything. There's a cost to your art, and historically, what we look like has been a cost of really dynamic proportions um around our identities, but like also especially with what the story that you just told, that's not a one-off. That's not a story that's like, "Oh, I can't relate to that," or "I can't connect with someone touching my hair, without my consent." Or I can't relate to power dynamics of being like, all right, how do I have to show up in this moment? Because now you've impacted me. And those are questions that as artists we're constantly asking, like what is the cost of me doing this show with this person? And I've done shows and started to do shows, and then people came to me afterwards expressing, you know, something of possibly a predatory nature. And then it's like, okay, well, I can't really associate with these folks like that. I can love them at a distance because obviously I'm not the judge nor jury on any of these cases. And I think that's like the conversation as we age and become viewed as elders in whatever community that looks like, which is wild in general to think about. But
Look,
like,
I'm not ready to be an elder yet, but here we are. I
we're
am
here.
to
We're
some people,
here.
the number of people who introduce me as their comedy mom, and I'm like, have we actually had a conversation?
Did I agree to
Like,
that?
I get
Um,
elevated.
but I mean, it's just like we are starting to be, that I wouldn't say changing the guard, but I think people, especially now, are seeing that. And as a generation, really that 40 to 60 is starting to step into some leadership, which I think, we're seeing this all across sectors. We're seeing this in all these spaces. And it's just like, how do I move with integrity, right? Because I can't say that it's not corrupt to some degree in multiple sectors and multiple arenas. Um, and I don't want to lead like that or really be, associated with folks who lead like that. Like I want inclusive environments. I know my audience and it's a really intergenerational, and it's a very multicultural audience. That's my audience. And so it's I of course, you can flex and do those things for different audiences in terms of who you're around and where you are, but it's also like these are tough choices that you have to make with your spouse, with your family, with your friends that get it, that are doing this. These are tough conversations. Like, when am I going to step out? When is this fight not worth what it does to me emotionally, spiritually, physically? Like, when is the time when I gracefully bow out? And that's a lot of the reason people will ask me why I don't do as much art. A lot of the reason is because I'm like, all right, if I'm gonna do this, I gotta fund this by myself or work with certain trusted, producers that I work with. You can't work with everybody.
Right,
Everybody ain't for me, and I'm not for everybody. But like, it's
right.
these are the choices, and these are the really hard conversations that we're having. like right now with like, or you'll say you came to me and asked like, "What do you think about this show?" And I'm like, "Oh, I have information. I hate to tell you this, but like, I think maybe you should go with another person or whatever."
And I think that part of the reason of the arts not having a HR and that predators were able to get away with stuff is that those conversations weren't happening. Like, people
Mm,
were generally getting bullied into not, sharing their experiences with people because, this showrunner, well, if you talk bad about them, they're friends with so many other people. Who's going to take your side? Blah blah blah. And that's
mhm,
stuff that an artist really shouldn't have to be navigating, but
right.
humans are human, so this is where we are. We gotta deal with what is, not what should be. I mean, it would be wonderful if we could get to what should be, but have we yet? It's 2024. If we haven't done it yet. And
Mhm,
it is, just going back to my question to myself is, first of all, how much of this game is just game, right? Because a lot of people play their entire lives like it's Monopoly. Like they're not invested. They don't acknowledge that they're actually dealing with other human beings' lives. Like they want the respect, but
mhm,
they don't feel obligated or inclined to render said respect to other humans. And
mhm,
as long as we have people who have that one-sided kind of view, it's going to be real difficult
mhm,
to, get change, absolutely affected. I will say though, at least from what I could tell, is that I would say Gen Xers, and I mean, of course, there's always been progressive-minded people across generations, so I don't wanna make it, but I have joke about this, but I believe this to be true. I feel like Gen Xers are the first generation that's just like, "Nah, stuff was messed up, man. What are we can't keep doing this stuff the way it's always been done." Like,
mhm,
I feel like that's coming to be, if not half, a small majority of Gen Xers that have that mindset,
mhm,
and so the more we can get people to acknowledge each other's humanity, hopefully the
mhm,
less we'll be dealing with these dehumanizing situations, because nobody wants to be in it. Nobody wants to be the object of one of those
mhm.
situations. Now, if we could just get the people who wanna be the person who's doing who's committing the trauma, if we get those folks to value that a little less, that'd be great, but
That would be great. So
that's the thing. It boils down to how do we affect consequences on these folks? How do we make them understand that it's in everybody's best interest for them to stop being an asshole?
right,
Because
right.
there's people who literally enjoy being a jerk.
Mm,
So how do
mm.
we make them enjoy it a little bit less?
That is the question. I'm gonna just leave that question lingering for anybody who wants to muse. I think about this often, especially as I am, in more leadership roles and having global like DEI and things like that. Like I'm definitely looking at things and power structures a bit differently. But to that, I would love to ask the question about how do you determine your lines? Like what's your lines in terms of material? Around your comedy? Like, what do you determine where that's the line? Like, I'm not gonna joke about that. How do you figure that out
Oh,
for
oh, oh,
you?
oh, that line. I thought you meant like how do I construct a set? No,
No,
what are
no.
my lines? Hmm. Honestly, um, I don't want to punch down. I don't want to punch down. So I'm really not a fan of low hanging fruit anyway, but I especially don't want to like punch down. But on the flip side, like I also want to respect relationships I have in my life. Like the jokes that
Mhm,
I tell about my kids also laugh about. Like if there's a situation that actually like hurt them or something like that, that's not something I'm going to talk about on stage.
right.
Um and it's funny because you're one of the people who's, known I say the before Leslie, before Mike, and
Mhm,
since, we got together and got married, like I do like I used to do a lot of dating stuff. Like a lot of my set was about dating stuff, which I mean, a lot of people doing dating stuff.
mhm,
But now I really haven't leaned into like I have some relationship stuff with Mike, but I feel weird talking about that dating stuff. He's just like, "Baby, talk about what you want. If it's funny, it's funny." But
mhm,
there's, this part of me that's like, I don't be talking about these, randos when I got this dude who's standing by me right now. Like to me, that's kind of, to me, it's a respect thing for him. Like, it's one thing for me to, like, joke about dating sites in general, but it's
Mhm.
a different thing to be like, "Well, there was this one dude I hooked up with when my husband is sitting right there," which I was talking to another comic about that, and they were like, "But he won, right? Like, he's single, but that dude lost,"
Right, he's like,
So,
"I'm still here," so
I mean, maybe the way that I think about it, but typically, like, I don't, and of course, I don't know every person in the room, so I don't know everyone's trauma. But I do try to avoid things that are, like, graphic. I know there's,
mhm,
folks reaching for stuff about, like, I'm gonna say women's reproductive health as opposed to, you know, the redacted word baby joke. You know what I mean? Because it's just kinda like, I don't understand why people still do that. And of course, people still, trying to milk the N word, like race irrelevant almost. I really have never used the N word in any of my sets. I'm not harassing somebody who does, but I just kind of feel like there needs to be a story there. Like, to me, and this is me speaking for Leslie, if I can't do my material clean, then is it funny? Like, I get
mm,
it, not everybody has that same philosophy, and that's great. Like, there's room for everybody, right? But for me, speaking for myself, like, I can't do a whole lot of profanity because I'm, like you said, I'm more of a storyteller.
mhm.
So, I mean, I may throw in an F bomb here and there, but it's not like
It has meaning.
that's not where right, that's not where the humor comes from. The humor comes from the story. But I mean, also speaking for me, I got this, I don't know. I feel like when an audience sees me, just knowing my history with the military and everything, and the career that I had, I feel like there's this expectation for me to be kind of a boardroom type black person, you know what I mean? And so
Say I'm like, "What do you mean?" Say more.
I mean, a person who has assimilated.
Oh, yeah, 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 no,
You know
I
what I
get you.
mean? Like,
Mhm,
and so sometimes when I use profane words, it just doesn't sound right. It's like
mhm,
you don't expect it to come out of my mouth. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So I don't know. But yeah, my lines really have to do with like I don't want to do jokes about like school shootings or that. I don't,
Right,
I
right.
I mean, I know people do them, and but
Yeah.
now don't get me wrong, I got a couple of insurrection jokes that I will only tell in front of certain audiences. Like,
The
why
material writes itself, you know?
like why was Congress so confused because it was the first time white people did something they didn't succeed? But see, it gets that look. It doesn't necessarily get a laugh. So
Like, I
everybody's
had to
like, "Oh,
calculate. I'm, like,
okay."
calculating, I'm like, "Yeah, but" no, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, yeah, on the surface.
Exactly. Oh,
But
man. Yeah, that's
this
cool.
year
That's
has
cool to
been
hear
shook.
about
I
that.
was like, "We cannot please in the name of everything holy." I cannot, that's a whole nother discussion.
Indeed.
The the thing that's coming up in November.
Yeah, 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 that thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of how you're navigating that space, I are election years harder and for you specifically, or how does that look for you?
Well, but I stick to my stuff. I stick to my stories, right?
Mhm.
Because probably the closest I'll get to election year material is if something funny happens to me when I go to vote.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I like to do things that people can kind of relate to even if they haven't experienced it.
Mhm.
And to me, like election stuff, it's election year, everybody's going to do election stuff. So unless I see something just really like obscure. Like if I see a story about, a guy who got voted in and he was already deceased, because I feel like that happened like out in Utah or somewhere,
I
that the
think
dude was
so.
deceased and they still voted for him.
Mm.
And so it was just like, okay, I mean, you loved him, but who's gonna actually do the job now? Next
Right,
one.
right,
Like
right.
that's not something you can just will to somebody, right? But other than that, it's just, I really don't wanna do what other people are doing, and
Mhm,
granted, congruent thought is absolutely a thing, but if
mhm,
everybody's flocking, that's why I didn't do Trump jokes.
right.
I refuse to do Trump jokes. First of all, everybody's doing Trump jokes, and that's the thing, an audience kinda gets tired of hearing the same thing from 3 different people as well.
Yeah.
So, if I keep things to being about me or my experience, typically, nobody else wants to try to be Leslie because she's out there, but it's also, a thing that the more personal you make your material, then the easier it is for you to, like, focus on that and explore it instead of trying to just pull stuff from. But, I mean, I absolutely, what happened just the other day, where were we? I can't pull it to mind right now, but
Mhm,
I do tend to I do, have my little notebook, and I tend to, like, if something happens that strikes me as funny, then I might jot myself a little note and, you know,
come back to it.
see where it goes to. Yeah, but I
Mhm,
I really but honestly, that has been my biggest, like, I don't wanna say downfall, but I don't write like a lot of comedians write. And
mhm,
that's part of the reason that I've been kinda struggling is I've been, relying on some of my older material. I have a few new things, but I've been
mhm,
relying on some of my older material because that's what's stuck in my brain.
mhm.
But I know. Well, we'll see. It's I could change my mind tomorrow.
And that's the cool thing about, art is that you can really do it on your time and with your energy. And so I love that. I do want to talk about, for people that may not know you, they may not know that your husband is white. And
Yes.
so, I do wanna talk about how you've navigated that recently, and if there's anything that you wanna share about that, because I know it's been a really beautiful experience and a story, and I just wanna give room for you to gush if you wanna gush or, whatever you wanna do about that.
Well, I gotta tell you, so we just gonna go way, 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 way back,
Mhm,
right? So when Leslie was a little girl growing up in East Texas, I actually would have crushes on little white boys. And, growing up in the 70s, it was just like, girl, you can't be looking at that little white boy.
mm.
What are you doing? So I don't know what it was about white kids that I was always attracted to. But then on the same token, like, if they expressed attraction to me, I would be like, nope, nope, can't do it. Nope, nope, nope.
Mhm,
So there was a whole lot of insecurity there. And the thing is, this is my perception. I mean, heaven knows I have, I'm not sitting here saying there are no black people in my life that like me. I mean, like, duh, here we are right now having this conversation, right? But I will say again, my perception is that Afro men typically don't approach me
mm,
for some reason or another. And at some point, you just say, okay, well, am I going to deal with what is or what should be? Right.
mhm, mhm,
And I mean, I shouldn't make that be like a zero number, but like not too long ago, a friend of mine had posted about this black farmer and that
mhm,
his wife wasn't black.
mhm,
And there was a lot of discussion in the thread about, well, why is he not investing in a sister and basically like coming down on him for not
mhm.
having a black wife. And I didn't want to jump in the thread because, valid points and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's just like, but you're all making the assumption that a sister has shown interest in him. Like,
And that
what
they
is he
had a
supposed to
connection,
do?
like, if I could, I would, but that's not my relationship audience, you know?
And I mean, that's the thing. And I mean, also, though, I mean, don't get it twisted. There was any number of white dudes that was just like, "No, you didn't make the cut, buddy." So
Right.
it's not
You're like, "I've
like,
trial and error."
right. I'm just looking for a dude who is going to see me as a human being and not just my genitalia.
Mhm.
And especially on the dating apps, that is legitimately
Mm,
92% of what dudes are looking for is as long as you have, genitalia that will, satiate their desires, then that's all they need. And so what's really funny though is really soon after Mike and I started talking. So like we didn't know we were on the same planet sharing each other's oxygen. And then
yeah.
we do, right? And I was in, kind of a rough spot. And so he was just like, "Well, I've got a spare bedroom in my apartment." And I'm just kind of like, what? Because who's trusting? You know what I'm saying? Who's trusting?
Right.
But he says, "But what you need is to be in an environment where you can flourish."
Mhm,
Okay, again, I'm like, that really sounds like some Cosmo bullshit. Like but also no one else is even like exploring any of that, right?
mhm.
And so it ended up I moved in with him really quick, right? But very early on, we both were very invested in communicating. Like for me, I mean, I'll say that I brought a lot of the motivation, as it were, about communication, about us
Mhm.
being honest with each other about like
Yeah.
everything.
Mhm.
And the longer we were together and the longer that I saw he was indeed being honest with me, it was just like, wow, this is wow. But he was kinda going through the same thing in reverse because he had been scammed so many times,
Mm,
because what guys experience a lot of is
yeah.
scammers because there's 18 dudes to every woman. That's a whole 'nother thing we can talk about as far as, like, hetero trying
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
get connected. And so he was just like, "And you never asked me to pay your phone bill." And I was just like, "'Cause I'm gonna pay my phone bill." Like, I don't understand. And there's absolutely times that, like, even now, he's just so invested in making sure that I have everything that I need and everything that, like, he gets low key offended when I put gas in the car.
So good.
Because he's like, but that's my job. Like I'm here to provide for you." And it in the big universal scale of things, it's ironic as all get out.
Mhm.
Because when I was going through with my second ex, one of the things that didn't happen was basically he was supposed to become the breadwinner, and that never happened. Right. So I
Right.
was the breadwinner, I was out working, I'm still parenting, doing all this kind of stuff, right? And so, you know, divorce happens, my finances go, down the tubes, all this kind of stuff. And fast forward to happier times, I meet up with Mike, right? So he gave me this car basically, right? That,
Mhm.
this is how I get around or whatever, right? And one day I'm driving the car and I literally have this like epiphany driving the car. I'm just like, here I am in this situation where this man actually wants to take care of me. This is exactly the thing that I was lamenting not having in my second marriage. And
Mhm.
I almost was too silly to see that I have it now.
Yeah.
Because all this
Mm.
hurt and all this unhealed stuff. So I'm over here, chastising myself, well, you're not making the kind of money that you used to make. You're not doing the kind of job you used to do, notwithstanding whether or not psychologically I could handle doing any of that. Right.
Right. And he's not
But,
asking you to, he's just like, "I'm here."
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. But yeah, but it's weird though, because in a way, it feels like we've been together a lot longer than we've been
Mhm.
because we just got married in September.
Right.
So we're only at what, 5, 6 months? Like we don't even
Mhm.
count because I don't know. But it does. It really feels very organic. And I mean, I joke about this, but also he is just a cool dude. Like
Yeah.
everybody likes him. And it makes me
Yeah.
feel a little weirded out because he's like, well, I don't, but he is just very, I feel like service-minded is not the right word.
Loving, generous, protective, kind,
Loving, generous,
giving.
protective, but he's also I know enabler has a bad connotation, but he's absolutely a person that if there's something he can do to help someone to be self-sufficient, then he'll do that.
That's really empowering, actually. So he's an
Well,
empowerer.
yeah.
I would give that.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
because I mean, of course, he's not marrying everybody that he knows, but there are other people in his life that and I mean, he's a very mechanical kind of guy. So if
Yeah.
somebody needs, a washer or dryer fixed, or you know what I'm saying? Like he's more than willing to help other people,
Mhm.
that they don't have to end up going down a spiral because they got this bill that they wouldn't ordinarily get,
Mhm.
you know? So
Yeah, you might get some
yeah.
calls after this and people be like, my washer, my dryer, about Mr. Mike. Can I talk to him?"
Next thing you
Well,
know, we got this odds and ends service, right?
right, right, a new LLC. Well, congratulations to you on that,
Thank
and I'm
you.
just
Thank you.
really happy. I've definitely seen you pre-mic and after mic, and I'm just really happy for what you have and hope that, it
It's funny
sustains.
because a lot of people, like, are so happy to see me happy, and especially, like, when we go out of town because 'cause we've been out of town a couple of times with people that knew
Mhm.
me, and everybody's just so happy that I'm happy, like, this one gal when we went to Michigan, has known me for many, many years, and she was just like, "But of all the people that I was really rooting for, like,
Yeah.
for the person that we wanted this to happen for. It's so
Mhm.
wonderful to see that." So I'm just really grateful that, I'm the kind of person that, people want good things for, even if they can't, give them to me because
Yeah.
I really believe that, that whole, getting back what you give, it's real.
Yeah. Indeed. So let's move on to thinking of getting that dreamer in here. And so I want to know what you're working on right now. What are your dreams for community, for yourself, for your marriage, whatever that is. I want you to just riff and do your thing. But tell us about what's on the horizon for you right now, tangibly, in theory, in vision. Let us know what's going on with you.
Well, you said you were going to touch on the podcast later. Did we talk about
That's
the
here.
podcast?
That's what we're
Okay.
talking about.
So the podcast, I got to get right in my seat talking about the podcast.
Come
So
on.
the podcast is myself and another Afro lady who's also twice divorced, Jamie Campbell. Um, she moves through names, so
Indeed, she's
she
very fluid
also
through the
calls herself
names.
Joy. But we wanted to create our intention is for the podcast to be an encyclopedia of sorts
Mm,
about relationships.
ooh,
And so I wanna call it, like, the relationship podcast. It doesn't always talk about or doesn't always sound like a relationship podcast because the first, like, 3 episodes, we're just talking about context, right?
yeah.
And so our target audience is, I'd say, like, 40-year-olds plus
Mhm,
who may not know much about non-binary lifestyles, may not
mhm,
know much about gender dysphoria, who may not know much about a lot of the topics that have been, brought to the forefront in the past, I'd say 5, 10
mhm,
or so years.
mhm,
Like I for one hadn't heard about a lot of these things until about 10, 12 years ago.
mhm,
And so what we're hoping for are people who want more information about it, but not so much from a standpoint of, I want to pursue these things, but I
mhm,
just want to be able to support people in relationships not like mine or having to deal with body issues or whatnot and not be ignorant, basically,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So in the first episode, we basically just kind of say, okay, in as much as monogamous heterosexuality has been quote unquote made the norm, there are
Mhm,
so many other, presentations, aspects, expressions
mhm.
of sexuality. So we talk about, different types of sexuality and stuff. But we just do that in the first episode. Then in the second and third episode, that ended up being a two-parter because we couldn't shut up. Um the we talk about honesty with self in that, are your desires your own or was this what you were taught by society?
Mm,
Because both of us have been in relationships where our partner was not completely honest with us about what their goals were. And
mhm,
then those relationships ended in divorce. And that's when you find out, oh, that's why these behaviors were like this. That's why this disconnection. And
mhm,
so we basically want folks to have more information and understand that they have options, but above all else, learn to be honest with themselves because you can't be honest with a partner if you're not being honest with yourself.
Ooh, this is good. I can't wait to listen to this. I'm like, yes, correct, correct, correct.
And so we want it to be a thing that hopefully people will wanna listen to it from
Mhm,
start and making it kind of sequential,
mhm,
but each episode, except for the ones that we designate as being part of a series or whatnot, could potentially be standalone, and we're gonna keep them for now to, like, a half an hour
okay,
until we see, what kind of response we get or whatnot,
mhm.
but, yeah, we're looking at, releasing the first episode on the 20th of March.
Yeah, y'all heard that.
So and, man, look, I'm stoked about the logo. Axe Stennett is doing our logo,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he sent us a couple of proofs, and it's noise. It's noise.
Nice.
I just wanna debut stuff and people be like, "Man, that's dope."
I
So,
know, right?
but
We'll
yeah,
see it. We'll see
we
it.
want we want people to talk about things and remove a little bit of the mystery
Mhm,
because unfortunately, in this America, a lot of times the word mystery is synonymous with fear.
mhm,
And we know what fear is used as an excuse. Fear
mhm.
is often blamed for stuff. And so we want people to have less fear about other humans
Right.
and embrace everyone's humanity and realize that we can figure out a way to coexist. I mean,
Mhm.
of course, this is not like, giving license to predators or anything like that. We're not talking anything like that. But for the folks that are legitimately just trying to mind their own business and live,
Mhm.
we want folks to be able to do that without other people. And I mean, on the flip side too, and this is another thing that came up at lunch today, and why should people from a marginalized population have to do the work of teaching you to be more comfortable?
Right.
Like, if you can find information, the internet is your friend, especially post-COVID. Like, so
Man.
much stuff is electronic now that, post-COVID.
Mhm.
So, if you really, really wanna learn about other people, there's information there. But we're willing to help be, one of those conduits of information. Because it's so
And a
funny, one of
connector of sorts, it winds up you wind up being a connector for
yeah.
sure. A bridge.
Because I'm, hetero monogamous, I'm about as vanilla as they get. No slight to my dude, but he's poly and pansexual. And so we're having these discussions, and I mean, like, in as much as I have had interactions with other people, so there's, some familiarity. I feel like my level of familiarity is just I can ask some questions that other people wouldn't know to ask.
Mhm.
But, I mean, I gotta be honest, my dude, he's a sweetheart, but, I let him listen to the raw audio when we went up to Michigan, and it kept his attention, and I was
Okay.
like,
That's
"Alright,
good.
that's
That's a step.
I'll take it, I'll take it."
They're our
So,
first line
we'll
of
see.
feedback, so we like that.
Right?
Right.
Right? But, let's see, outside of the
The
podcast,
cast.
so,
And what's it
I'm also
called?
as yet.
As Yet. And
Because at
March
first we were
20th.
playing around with yet to be named or whatever, and I was like, but as yet, like, I feel like as yet is like leaving room for
Mhm.
growth and like, as yet to be determined, right? So
Mhm.
we may not always stay with relationship dynamics as, the main idea. Like we're definitely, because this is election year, we're definitely going to be talking some politics through the course of the year.
Sure. Sure.
So, and that's the thing though too, is in as much as opponents of progress are so vocal about the stuff that they don't like, they real quiet about the BS that they putting through the legislature.
Really quiet.
Real quiet.
Yeah.
And so we definitely want to, be shedding some light on some of that stuff because oh gosh,
Yes.
just it's ah.
It's a lot. It's a
Jesus
lot.
Jesus didn't sign off on none of this. You hear me say that a lot in the
Like,
podcast. Like Jesus
"White
wasn't talking about that.
Jesus?"
Nope,
Yeah,
nope,
that's
nope.
white Jesus,
Ain't
and we
none
don't
of
know
this in the
him.
Bible. None of it.
For real.
But the other thing that I've been sitting on, and people who know me that are listening to this are gonna be like, talk about your book. So
Yeah!
I am actually, I've started on it, and I'll be honest with you, I've hit so many hiccups, but I have a memoir in the works.
Mm,
And basically, it and Karen, you know this more than anybody else. My life story kind of reads like a Greek tragedy. Like there's
it's
been
wild. It's a wild
it's
time.
been a lot.
It's
It's
a
been a
wild read. Yes. Oh,
but that's it exactly. That's the but especially I want to, get into the journey of self-discovery that I've been on since my second divorce.
mhm,
And just how I learned about, needing to be honest with myself. Like one of the things that we talked about in the podcast was like, in as much as a desire or a thought or a feeling might not be something that you were taught like in childhood or whatever,
mhm,
it still exists. It's still real. And so, especially what mainstream Christianity or even, radicalized Christianity will teach you is no, those thoughts, desires, feelings are sin.
mhm. You're
Like,
wrong. Yeah.
you can't be angry. But see, if you've been, okay, see,
I'm
you
doing a
know,
whole workshop on like sacred rage, but like, yeah, it's a lot of
and, and,
messages around that.
and that's the thing. It's just like what I think we corporately need to embrace is that emotions are real
Yeah.
and we need to figure out what to do with them.
Yes.
And look, your girl is good for a primal scream every now and again. I used to get in
Just
my
get
car
me
and
out
just
to the
let it
woods and
go.
cathartic scream for
Look,
real.
that burn those calories.
Mhm,
But that's the thing is if you spend too long holding stuff back,
mhm,
it's coming out.
mhm,
It's absolutely coming out. And I spent literal decades stuffing my feelings.
mhm.
And then when I started feeling feelings because I had given myself permission, because I, finally started being honest with my counselor. And that's another part too, is if you're in therapy, do the work and think about how you're thinking.
Mhm.
Because I absolutely was hiding my issues from my therapist now. Lucky for me, the military was paying for him. So it's not like I was wasting
Yeah.
my sorry, taxpayers.
Mhm.
But but I wasn't being honest with my therapist. I would go in there and I would say everything was fine, and I was surviving physical abuse. I was surviving emotional, financial abuse. I was
Mhm.
surviving the loss of a child. I was surviving all this stuff and being like, well, everything's cool, because what I
Right.
had been taught was I'm not in the hospital, so I must be fine
Right.
or I'm not, strung out on alcohol or other substances, so I must be fine. Sometimes doing okay does not mean that you're fine.
Right.
And I think the more people that realize that can actually start seeking actual help and learning actual tactics to deal with, the things that they're trying to heal from.
Well, that's that
So
culture of
all of that
fear.
somewhere.
Yeah.
You recording this, right? Because I'm gonna need those notes.
Yeah, 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 you got them. But this is that culture of fear that, we see kind of rampant because we're so scared to tell the truth, especially when we feel like it's too much or a lot. We're scared to tell the truth, and that's a product of our socialization. We actually aren't meant to hold those things in, like we're meant to release them. I was talking with Aaron recently and we were talking about animals, and I was like, what about animals and how they do this? And we were talking about how animals could complete the stress cycle. So if they are traumatized or something happens, maybe they, are hunted by a predator or something happens, they have processes organically that release that trauma from their body. And we do not do that. We hold this trauma in and we don't process it and we don't release it. And then it manifests in our body in multiple ways. And I just think it's absolutely right because it is a thing that we are taught. And I, specifically as a Black woman, I was taught to, you know, not share for multiple reasons, whether it be privacy, right? Like we keep family stuff in house, or whether it was like,
Ooh, that
we
one is
don't.
such a big one. That one is such a big one because that's
That's
yeah.
a big one,
I'm
or
sorry.
like or you're good, or it's like, I don't want, people to know how bad it really is, or I don't wanna
That
complain. or I don't wanna be ungrateful, or I don't wanna say complain about something and then it gets worse because we're taught that if you complain about it, it's gonna get worse, and you're like, "What's worse than
Why you
this?" And
keep
they're
telling
like,
everybody my
"Don't say
journal,
that, don't
Karen?
jinx it."
That's
No, it's all
and
those things. Yeah, for sure.
and especially, like, what you were saying about, well, one with the family secrets, but I and that's the thing, you've got all of these layers of don't share, don't share, don't share, don't share, don't
Mhm,
share,
mhm,
and then we're expecting it all to just, like, dissipate or something. Because the reality of it is it's being stored as nervous energy.
yep,
Like, we may not know the exact mechanism, but at the end of the day, our brains and our nervous system, our
mhm.
muscles, all of this stuff is, like, in there. Have you
It's in
seen,
there.
I'm sure you have, like, information about somatic movement and, like,
Yeah, Aaron's in the
triangles and
somatic
stuff like
class
that?
right now, so I got all this
Man,
stuff, and
that
I do
stuff is
polarity, so and Reiki. I'm a Reiki practitioner, so
where are you?
yeah, I don't really
To do
share that a lot because,
that?
you can ask for that, but it's not something that I do as often because 'cause I'm protective of my energy.
Well, I was gonna say that's definitely gotta be an investment. Because
Mhm.
'cause I'll be honest with you, I've been afraid to go to a Reiki practitioner because I think I'm too much.
It's all about your energy in the space. I mean, and you have to have, like, cleansing things prior to and after,
Okay.
so, I mean, I think a good practitioner will make sure that they are in the right space to be able to work with you, but when it comes to your energy, it's your energy that's moving, and we try to break up any, lack of any barriers or any obstructions of flow of energy, and that's really what Reiki is just getting the flow of energy to be organic and fluid throughout your body and your nervous system.
Well, I do see an acupuncturist, so I guess
I
I'm
haven't
that's
done that, see?
adjacent. Let me be honest with you, I don't know how bad your life has to be for sticking needles in you to make you feel better, but it
Yeah.
works. I can't explain how it works, but it works. And
Hmm.
it's funny because, like, there's been times that, she's accessed a point and it's been, as we'll say, spicy. When did we start saying spicy, by the way?
I
Some
like
people
it,
like
but
I like it, but also I'm just kinda like, but it means so many things now.
right.
But, I can definitely tell, um, between, starting a session and ending a session, that there's definitely a change.
Hmm,
And yeah, look, I can't explain it, but I definitely, and I mean, if you are at all, curious about it,
mhm,
I could recommend the one that works with me highly, because she
fantastic.
does listen a lot too. Like, she does
That's
listen.
important.
Like, one time I went in for an appointment. I don't even know exactly what was going on, and old habits die hard. Like, we're talking about therapy, right? A lot
Mhm.
of people have this idea that going to therapy is like a finite thing. Like, at some point you're going to be better and you're not going to need it anymore. Get that out your head. Get that out
Yeah.
your head, because
Stuff's
as long
coming
as
at
you're
you
living
all day
right,
long.
exactly. There's gonna be more stuff. And I forget what exactly had happened, but I had unknowingly gone back to this bottling a little bit.
Mhm.
And I don't know if part of it was just like, I'm so tired. Like, I've been dealing with stuff
Yep.
since ever. I just don't want to deal or whatever. But, we were talking or whatever. And at some point she said, "Do you just need to cry?" And I don't know what it was, but her, like, giving me permission in that moment, I just start bawling.
Mhm.
And it was like, huh, because I don't know, I feel like, especially for Black women, especially for women who are parents, I mean,
Mhm.
there's so much. And women who have to deal with other humans
Indeed.
at any point, right?
This
But
applies.
I think that sometimes that survival mode, those old habits really do not wanna go away,
They
right?
don't. They don't.
And sometimes we just need another human being to be like, "But hey, you're safe, yeah,
Mhm.
and it's okay for you to be vulnerable in this safety."
Mhm.
And I mean, like, it almost takes saying it in those words, because anything less specific may not evoke the trust that you need to have to release whatever you need to release.
And then it
But
has
yeah,
to be on the back end. I don't have to hear my business out in the streets, right? Like if I do
when
come and share, then on the back end, I need to make sure because people start with little small increments, one conversation, and then they see how that goes. And if they hear their business out in the community, right? And then it's like one other thing, and you don't want a lot of your information just all of a sudden, like it starts leaking, and then we have another conversation, but it's got to be safe and then follow up as continuing to be safe.
And I mean, going back to the thing about relationships and
Hmm.
trust, but that's where the honesty comes in. Like the only way
Hmm.
that you can really learn how to trust somebody, and I'm not talking about playing these silly little games and like seeing if you can. One thing that I just cannot for the life of me understand, you see all these videos like, well, I pranked my boyfriend or girlfriend into thinking this thing was happening. It's like, why are you doing that? Why are you?
Just trauma on top of trauma. That's cool.
Oof.
Not
And
funny.
especially if you don't if you're already acknowledging that you don't really know this person and you gonna, like, put them through a thing just for the sake of putting them through a thing, like, why? I don't get it. But
Yeah.
but yeah, absolutely, in relationships, like, we everybody says they wanna trust somebody, but they don't wanna be honest, and that's the only way it's
The
their
only way.
what's the word I'm looking for? Symbiotic?
Mhm, mhm, that's it. What does it say? Yep, symbiotic, that's it. Mutually symbiotic. I only think of that when I think of mushrooms, which is so strange.
I know.
Mushrooms and trees, like, that's how I originally learned the term, and I'm just like, "Oh, that's a mutually symbiotic relationship," that was so cool to know that in, like, 7th grade. Um,
Now
cool,
I get
so anything else on your docket? Anything else you're kinda working through right now? I
uh,
love I love this conversation.
That's that's like the main things. That's the things that Imma speak of in public. I mean, of course, there's the private work that I'm doing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
there's the because here's the thing, talk about my relationship with Mike is that I'm finally in a relationship that's safe
Mhm,
and that I can trust him. And because of all my prior experiences not being
mhm.
so much this is a new uncomfortable space for me. Like
Yep.
imagine being so comfortable with abuse. And people don't understand that. A lot of people don't understand that about people who stay in abusive situations. They don't understand that the person who is being abused, they got other things to consider. The abuse is not the only thing. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's one of the ways that predators keep,
Mhm.
their victims is that they've made sure that this person doesn't have other options or
That
means.
isolating. Mhm.
Right. And I was having this discussion with some other friends a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, what y'all gotta understand is like, if you know you're gonna get your ass beat 3 times a week, there's a part of you that's just like, it's not 5 times a week. And
Mm.
the uncertainty of going out of that house to who knows what, at least here, it's only
What you're
going to be
gonna
three
get.
times a week.
Mhm.
And after so many, it doesn't even have the intimidation,
Mm.
factor. Like a lot of people think that you're starting over each time, but it does. And that's
It takes a little bit of your soul each time, you know?
no, it absolutely does. It absolutely
Yeah.
does. But it's like again, in the context of you trying to figure out what you would do if you left it,
Mhm.
and a lot of people don't understand that that is a very compelling factor
Right.
of the decision, to
Mhm.
stay or go.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, I'm grateful that people now are trying to have more empathy and recognizing, okay, that may not be the decision that I would make, but I have to work with this
Mhm.
person where they are as opposed to try
Yep.
to make them be another me.
Mhm.
World needs all that. But when I talk about the work that I'm doing, like I have a literal team of
Yeah.
counselors and coaches,
Yep.
plural on both.
Same.
And right.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing, like, I'll be in one session and it'll make me think of something that I need to discuss in a different session.
Absolutely.
So, the idea of therapy and coaching as being like this finite process, I think is really kind of a disservice.
Mhm.
But to me, for me, the goal is to one, work on my self-awareness so that I'm
Mhm.
not engaging in behaviors that I don't want to engage in,
Right.
right?
Right.
But to get myself to the point where I have the space to where I can support other people.
Mhm.
Because I'll be honest with you, as far as my book goes, I have so much fear of haters, which makes like no sense. But I really like, once this release is public, right?
Mhm.
And I really don't want to deal with people questioning my truth, which is absolutely going to happen. That's what people do.
I
Somebody's going to
mean,
read
you
it.
don't have to deal with it though. I can tell you that right now. I mean, unless it depends on how engaged you are in terms of the comments. That was something that I had to do when I started this podcast and I started, my Patreon and all those things. It was like, are you willing to be in the public eye in terms of people feeling like if anything were to take off, if a clip, of us talking goes out wild, then it's like and goes viral, am I ready to hear criticism or thoughts? And I mean, I think that will be determinant around where I'm at emotionally, but like I don't have to engage, and I think I give like you were talking about permission, I give myself permission slips all day long, and I think what you're talking about are really collective themes that we're experiencing right now, whether it be in the arts or whether it be, in this time of life around our age. I think these are really collective themes with what's going on right now. So I'm in a way like sad that you're grappling with it, and I also like can relate because I think we're all to some degree grappling with, what does it even mean to be public and visible in this moment when people just spew their opinions and don't have any regard for your humanity and your realness as a human. I think that's challenging right now.
And I mean, at the end of the day, so like bringing in the dreamer, I would like, I want, my dream is that my story and the things that I've been through may help other people.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that I very, very rarely talk about in public is what happened to my son who passed away.
Right.
But I do want to share because this helped me immensely. So my son at had just turned 11
Mhm.
and he got meningitis and he didn't survive it.
Mhm.
And at the time where we lived, there was an older couple who lived down the street who had lost a son approximately the same age,
Mhm.
but his son would have been our age at that time, right? So
Mhm.
his son would have been in his like 30s.
Mhm.
And so they came to us and they were just like, look, first of all, you loved him. That's why we
Mhm.
grieve, because you love a person. Like when
Mhm.
you're not grieving, that's because the attachment to the person wasn't as strong.
Mhm.
And so they were like, first and probably above all else, stop telling yourself that you can just forget it
Mhm.
because you're not. And there's a lot of people who want you to get over it because they're uncomfortable, and that's their stuff,
Mhm.
right? But don't hold yourself to this standard that, one day I'm just going to look on this day and not have any emotion about it. Or one day I'm going to look at this picture and not have any emotion about it. Of course, you're
Mhm.
going to have emotion about it because you loved it.
Mhm.
And that was far and away the most helpful piece of advice
Mhm.
going through the whole thing because it was just like, oh, this is a realistic expectation. And I can absolutely honor my son every year. And it doesn't mean any less of the three children who survived him.
Mhm.
It's just you absolutely have every right to have a place in your life for someone who is no longer alive.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I'm hoping for the podcast and for my book is for people to understand that a lot of this noise that you get from society is not a realistic
Mhm.
expectation. And like you said earlier, so many of my experiences, while unpleasant, are not outliers.
Mm-mm.
So if we can get people to a place of dealing with what is as opposed to what should be,
Mhm.
then, I feel like we would be better equipped to deal with stuff. Would I love, for people to respect each other unequivocally and, not harass each other and,
Mhm.
stay in
Mhm.
their lane as it were, whatnot? I'd love that. That would be freaking amazing. But the reality
Fantastic.
is we got too many people in this planet who think it's their job to, play Satan in hell. It's not that's
I
not who
always
you
wonder, like, do they wake up like, how Satany can I be today? You just like,
well, the problem is they're not saying how Satany can I be, they saying how Christ-like can I be. Tell me I'm
oh,
wrong.
ooh, that's a word. Okay, all right.
She said back on that one. Tell
Bloop,
me I'm
bloop,
wrong.
bloop, 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 bloop.
Ooh,
That's a good one. That's a
let me
good. That's a
let me
good way
grab
to
that
kind of
tissue real quick.
close that. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know what moment it would be, but I knew a zinger was coming. So this is the moment, and I really just do, I just want to summarize that for the audience around your book, and I'll stay on you outside of here around when that's coming, because I definitely want to be one of the first to read that. But um around these themes of like grief and healing, and as these perpetual journeys as opposed to these one-time events. And so I think, especially as we see what's going on globally as well, this is something that we are navigating as a collective, those of us that are trying to be honest and trustworthy and do things and do the right thing, and do it the right way, and learn and grow and develop and shift and change. I think this is something that is very current right now, is grappling with grief, grappling with healing, grappling with enoughness or too muchness, or what
Yeah.
do I do with all of these feelings that I have been told to stuff down, and now they're here and I can't escape them. So like, how do I process that? And that's really where the art comes in, those relationships come in, that slew of people that you have that are in your corner supporting you. I've built that over time, and that's a resource and a privilege. And what does it mean to know that, and then support others that are trying to find their way as well. And I just think that's a really beautiful full circle kind of discussion there around that. So thank you for that.
Oh, of course. No, thank you.
Yeah. So my last question is around, it's not really a question. I'm gonna hand the mic to you
Ooh,
proverbially, figuratively, and you will either give me a scenario and I will talk through it. The scenario could be true, false, piecewise, whatever. And I will tell you what I would have done. And then we'll talk about maybe what you did or what you would are thinking right now. Or you could just ask me some questions, whatever you want to do, because I
just a
know you're a
second.
little
It's
seasoned in
definitely
this
a second.
podcaster thing. So it's the second thing. All right, so yeah,
It's a
you take
second
the
thing.
mic, you take over. We got a Culture of You Take Over by Leslie Battle.
So my question to Karen though, because you two are, I'm gonna say slash, you're, you know,
Hmm.
professional, also poet slash
Hmm.
writer
Hmm.
slash, you're doing all that track. But you're gonna be mad at me for this question.
Ah.
Do you have, or does there exist one of your expressions of self as far as your art or your professional or what have you, but which one of those things do you feel is most beneficial?
um which one? I mean, I think the writer piece is, and I could say author, and then in that umbrella, poetry sits, right?
Okay.
But I think around, because a lot of elements go into my book launches, and the things that I do in terms of events, and giving back as well. I just did some poetry. I did my song for the Rise Sister Rise, right? Like, so Black Girls Rising. There was a huge event, and so I got to do some poetry there. And I love the MC part. I love Black people. I love being around Black events. Those are my favorite to host. But like, when I think about the art. Like, I've written a chapter in an organizational management book. I've written a lot of articles and blogs for, whether it be the Buckeye Flame or our blog at Leadership Columbus, like when I was doing that. Um, and I have 2 poetry books, and my 3rd one is currently underway. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I have like, just looking at it, if I had to say which one was, like, official, it would be the writing element of it. I think the performance space is tricky right now, one that's, like, official for me right now because it's what I have capacity for, is the comedy, is the improv. That has been something that I've always wanted to have more time for, in terms of rehearsal and organizing and producing and curating, but, as we move towards, like, production, like, that's a heavy lift, and I don't do anything half-ass. So, in that element, it's like, okay, that's what I'm working on right now. If I could be paid to do one of those, it would be right. It would
Gotcha.
be right. If that was all I was doing was writing, it would be in the and maybe journalism takes that because you get to interview and write, right? So there's an element of that. Um, but people are always like, "Well, what's next for you or what's going on?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just kind of just stacking chips so I can play when I want to." And that's
Right?
that's really what I try to do. I mean, any money that comes in for me on an individual basis is going to, family. There's a lot of support there, community support. And obviously I like to travel, so that's what goes in there as well. But it's one of those things where I'm trying to like I'm starting to have that yearning during my weekday of wanting to be doing something different. And
Mm,
so there is that element. It's like, okay, so the next thing, I guess, and I do some comms in my current job, and that's where I'm like, okay, I do get to write. I mean, it is heavily edited and branded, but I still get to access that, so that's exciting for me, and I enjoy that. So I'm just, if I had to be one thing, I think it would be somewhere in the literary arts, right around journalism, writing, book tours, that kind of thing. So all those elements would still be in there of having conversations with others about their takes or what landed for them in those books or how it supported them in reading those books. But yeah, I would probably just write.
okay, I have one more question because you mentioned
Mm,
this in the beginning, and I almost forgot about this. But you said that I'm a curator, so technically, I guess this question is about me.
mm,
But because one of the things that Leslie has really struggled with is seeing herself the way that other people see her. Like, it took me till
okay.
50 something years to just
Hmm.
kinda get a
Hmm.
glimpse of what other people have been like, "You've been doing this all the time, like, what are you doing?"
Hmm.
But in what way do you see me curating events? Because I really
Ooh.
don't think of myself as someone who has organized a lot of events.
No, but in
Okay,
curation, I think there is the collaborative element. And so I know, even just watching you determine what shows and what things you'll be a part of.
okay,
There, I think it's a standard that people know that they have to lean into when they're working with you. And so in that regard, sometimes just your way of being or them being like, I don't know how much you get this. I get this a lot where they're like, who else should we be in the show? Or if this is the theme, do you have anyone else that we think should do that? That's part of the curation and strategizing,
okay,
right?
that's fair.
So I think there's a standard that you have around who you'll work with and who you'll be in the room with, and that can definitely shift what those events look like and how that looks. So I think we could say part of the curation team. But that's, something that I would love to see more of in terms of when you figure out how much capacity you want. And if that's not something you want to do, I don't want to make you do that. I don't want to throw that title on you if you don't want it. But I know I would come to your comedy events. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and that's this is kind of going back to the honesty with yourself thing. So one of the things
Mhm.
that I really struggled with was acknowledging things that I've done. Like, I don't know what happened when
Mhm.
I was a young person, but I got really invested in not becoming conceited, but to the
They
point
tell
that
us that. They tell us to not get too big for our britches.
yeah, but I got it bad. I got it so bad. And so even now, because the way that you explained it, no, I absolutely do those things, but I really hadn't put a label on it. And I think there's something about putting a label on some, you know, actions and behaviors that makes it seem like more of an obligation or something like that when
Mhm,
you're doing what you've been doing. You
mhm,
just don't think about it as kind of going back to the story of me realizing that I had the life that I dreamed about, but then I almost didn't see it
mhm,
because I was letting other stuff cloud it. So I think that also is part of the self-awareness pieces. But you know, in being honest with yourself, acknowledge what you are doing because
mhm,
especially if you're trying to set realistic expectations and you're telling yourself you're not doing a whole bunch of stuff, but you don't understand why you're tired all the time.
mhm.
So, yeah, but no, thank you for that.
My pleasure. Well, it has been really wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be
Yes,
here.
my pleasure. Thank you for being a guest, and look out for that podcast As Yet coming out
As
March
that.
20th. When this comes out, it'll be very soon and close to the time that that is coming out. So jump right over off of this podcast and get on that podcast and listen to my dear friends, Leslie and Jamie. So I know that's going to be great. I can't wait to see what that's about. And thank you for being here and thank you for being
Oh,
vulnerable.
thank you. Thank you so much. And you
Mm,
too. I mean, we didn't get to it today, but you and Aaron and so many friends have just taught me so much.
mm.
And look, I still got to read Rest is Resistance too cuz
Yes,
that's
I
on
do
the
wanna
list.
know. Maybe I should do, like, a book club on that because I think
Ooh,
there is some things to discuss in there as well because, you know, people have different experiences of rest, especially now when it's like rest and it's like, yes, and, like, I still have to function and inflation and, all of these things. So, I think there could be some really good conversations there for sure.
but I think when you if it, I think that so many times we're saying we don't have the time, but we're not making the time. You know what I
Sure,
mean? When you make the
sure.
time, you find the time.
Mhm.
But I have one more thing. So
Yeah.
I went to the Rest Collective event last week
Yeah, I
at
heard.
Replenish.
Uh-huh.
And so it was so funny because Erin invited me to draw a card. Now she's got 3 different decks of cards, right? And so me and Mike have been sitting around, you know, fussing about how we haven't been, you know, eating the best and we're not exercising like we should. And I hope I can get this to focus because this is so funny that this is the card that I pulled.
Oh, right there. My body is a mirror of my inner thoughts and beliefs. I nourish it with good food and healthy exercise.
You know
Pew
how hard I
pew.
card around the room. And so Aaron was just like,
Feeling
"Well, do
it.
you want another card?" I was like, "Nah, this was plenty. This is great. That's all I need."
Right. It's so true. Well, I hope you come out to more of those. I am doing the one, I believe it's in June around grief. I'll get some dates out for that. And then or
Ooh,
grief is
okay,
in December. I'm doing the one on anger and rage, righteous rage in June. So
okay.
yeah, keep coming to those. That is a project that we're doing with GCAC to create restorative and reprieve spaces for artists to kind of connect, talk about similar challenges and restore. So I'm
I
glad you
really
came.
enjoyed I really enjoyed it. And it was so funny because all of us in the room were Leos. And so
If I
it
would have been
was
there, I would have been Leo too. I would have been another Leo in that room.
but no, it was a good time. But yeah, no,
Yes.
thank you so much for having me on, and till next time.
Until next time.